Today I'm out in Tennessee with the 2023 Toyota Highlander. This is currently the best-selling midsize three-row crossover in the US, and for this model year, Toyota is shaking things up by giving us not a new 3.5-liter V6, but a 2.4-liter turbo engine standard. In fact, there's just no V6 Highlander period for 2023. Your choices are now 2.4-liter turbo or 2.5-liter hybrid. Since the majority of the Highlander is unchanged for 2023, let's just skip on ahead to what has changed. And the biggest of those changes is the engine. No naturally aspirated V6, that's likely going to offend some Toyota traditionalists. Instead, we get a 2.4-liter turbo, basically borrowed out of the Lexus RX and the Lexus NX. Now under this hood, the engine is tuned for regular unleaded, not premium, so power numbers change a little bit. 265 horsepower, 309 pound-feet of torque. Thanks to the 17% torque increase and the very broad torque plateau, this engine will actually get you faster 0 to 60 than the outgoing V6, despite producing a little bit less power. It's also a bit more efficient. 24 miles per gallon is what you'll get in this model. It's available as a front-wheel drive vehicle or an all-wheel drive vehicle. 8-speed automatic is standard, and max towing will top out at 5,000 pounds when properly equipped. Now, Toyota has said that some emissions are lower with this engine, not CO2, but mainly nitrous oxide, so this is a bit greener, a bit more efficient, but mainly a bit peppier and more powerful, because the focus with this engine seems to be drivability, not necessarily fuel economy. If you want better fuel economy, there is the hybrid Highlander. That's going to start at $40,220 for this model year, and that's going to give you about 235 horsepower or so, and 35 miles per gallon if you treat your Highlander nicely. The majority of the interior is unchanged for 2023, so you can still get the red leather that this model is sporting, and the dashboard theme is definitely very similar. Moving over to the middle of the dash, however, we see a big change in the new infotainment software. We see this spreading across the Toyota and Lexus lineup. It features wireless CarPlay and Android Auto integration and connected navigation functionality. Now, the important thing to know about the connected navigation is that it, of course, requires a subscription and internet connectivity. So if you're going through an area with limited cell service, you should keep that in mind. Down here we have controls for the dual zone automatic climate control up front. You can also control the rear climate control zone there as well. We have a redesigned Qi wireless charger, but the rest of this interior is essentially the same. Same shifter, 2 USB-C charge ports there, the drive mode selector and mode selector for the all-wheel drive system, auto brake hold there, things like that. On the driver's side, we don't find the full LCD cluster that we see in the new Crown. Instead, it's a partial LCD design in this particular model. Some of the stability control systems you can see are off right there. And then we have the same steering wheel design that we've had in the past. Now let's get the Highlander out on the road. The first questions we need to answer are you going to miss the horsepower, and are you going to notice the extra torque? Missing the horsepower? Absolutely not. When you floor it, this goes 0 to 60 supposedly a little quicker than the outgoing model, although I don't have official 0 to 60 times. I suspect it's a pretty minor difference, probably 1/10 of a second, something like that. What you are going to notice, however, is the extra torque. And you'll notice it in two ways. If I go ahead and come to a stop here again, and then start off gently, you'll notice that the transmission is going to shift a lot earlier. The engine doesn't really rev up to 3,000 RPM when you're going from 0 to 45 miles an hour in a few seconds, just as you normally would in stop and go or slow and go traffic or moderate city traffic. You're going to notice in those situations the transmission is going to shift really early compared to the V6. Sometimes that may make things feel a little bit less smooth, but it's going to improve your fuel economy. The other thing you'll notice is in higher speed travel, say I'm going 40 here and I want to go to 45, the transmission just downshifts just one gear and you get a lot of acceleration. Or if you dig a little bit shallower into the accelerator pedal, it doesn't even bother downshifting at all, because we get all of that low end torque from the turbocharged engine, so it just doesn't need to downshift as much. Those are the two things you'll notice instantly. The next thing you'll notice is that it's a bit gruffer. You'll definitely hear more engine noise in the cabin, and you'll really notice that from a stop. It's just not as refined sounding as the outgoing 3.5-liter V6, but it's understandable why Toyota has decided to go in this direction, because it improves performance, it improves feel, and it improves emissions. So it's really a trifecta for Toyota and for the buyer that's interested in this. I am surprised, however, that Toyota chose not to put extra sound deadening between the engine compartment and the passenger compartment, because I think that would have made this feel more refined. If you don't hear the turbocharged engine, it doesn't really matter how different it sounds from the V6, if you just don't hear it at all. If you're shopping for the new Highlander, I strongly recommend getting the optional all-wheel drive system, and here's why. There is so much low-end torque, and it's so easily accessible that you will definitely feel some torque steer even in the all-wheel drive model, and you're probably going to get a ton of wheel spin in the front-wheel drive model. If you're a fan of front-wheel spin, then just go right ahead. If you're not, then you might want to get the all-wheel drive system. I think there's a reason that Toyota has not provided any front-wheel drive models for us to test out here in Nashville, because that's probably going to have a lot of front wheel spin, but I think that might be kind of fun. You will certainly notice a lot of torque in this engine, very different from the Palisade or the Telluride, or really insert everything except for the Mazda CX-9. And in some ways, this actually reminds me a little bit of the Mazda CX-9 and why I like the CX-9 so much, and so does everybody else, because that turbocharged engine is fantastic. And this reminds me a lot of that, only wrapped in Toyota reliability, the Toyota dealer network, and the rest of the package of the Highlander. Most likely 60-0 and handling scores are going to be exactly the same because the rest of the structure of the Highlander is unchanged for this model year. Fuel economy is a little bit tricky to talk about. Toyota said that the fuel economy numbers are essentially the same as the outgoing Highlander model, but in real-world driving, you'll probably get slightly better fuel economy. It's been a bit difficult to tell out here, but on our early morning drive out to the place where we're doing most of the video here, we did average about 24 miles per gallon, and that seems to be a little bit better than I remember in the outgoing V6, but you're gonna have to wait until I can get one of these at home so I can run it through the usual drive cycle and really have an accurate number for comparison. Although the move to a turbocharged engine is likely going to offend some Toyota traditionalists, I suspect the vast majority of Highlander shoppers are going to be happy with this swap, because it simply makes this feel peppier and more livable, and that's what's going on with this. It is a little bit faster supposedly, we'll be able to test that soon, but the big thing you'll notice is just that the engine doesn't feel like it's underwhelmed as much as the V6 can. Going up a hill like this, you dig a little deeper in the throttle, transmission doesn't even need to downshift. So even though it doesn't have as much horsepower as the outgoing engine, because of the massive amount of torque and the low RPMs where that torque happens, it feels more powerful and it feels peppier than the outgoing V6. And that's probably more important for the average shopper. Depending on what you're going to do with the vehicle, the auto start soft stop system, whether it's on or off, etc., this is probably going to give you slightly better fuel economy than the other model. But if you really were interested in fuel economy, you should just get the hybrid version. And that model is essentially unchanged for this model year. It's not going to be as peppy as this, but it's sure going to be a lot more fuel efficient. If you want to get your hands on the new Highlander, Toyota says that this is on sale right at the same time that you're watching this video, and the price tag is a little more dear than the outgoing V6 model. This is going to start at $36,420. But I think that that's worth the extra drivability improvements. You will certainly notice the extra low-end torque. This transmission is not going to be shifting as much as the previous Highlander with the V6 engine that had a lot less torque. So if you're hill climbing, you're just cruising down the highway and you're gently passing someone, you'll notice that the experience is going to be smoother because you won't have as many shifts. Now, on the other hand, because that torque happens so low, this transmission is going to be shifting very rapidly as you accelerate gently from a stoplight. So you'll notice that stoplight to maybe 45 miles an hour, the shifts are going to happen a lot sooner, and sometimes they are a bit more noticeable. So this is not as smooth as the outgoing V6, but it pays dividends in real-world fuel economy, emissions, and of course, real-world power as well. Now, if you want the hybrid model, that is still available, and that's going to start at $40,220. And I suspect if I were shopping for a Highlander, that's the model that I would get, because the fuel economy is truly impressive. You're going to get at least 10 miles per gallon better fuel economy out of the hybrid system than the turbo, but clearly it's not going to be as swift. However, it is essentially a no compromises hybrid model because the interior is exactly the same, and on the outside, it looks exactly the same as this Highlander as well. Really, the only difference is going to be the blue Toyota logo. Interesting twist, this doesn't have any turbo badging on the outside. It just says Highlander, and apparently that's the way customers like it. Let me know what you're thinking about the new Highlander down there in the comment section. Do you wish that Toyota had just stuck with the V6 engine, perhaps redesigned it again, something along those lines? Or are you on board with Toyota's new move towards turbochargers with higher torque numbers, better fuel economy, and decent towing as well? We don't know what this is going to mean for reliability numbers in the Highlander, but logically long-term, it could lead to lower reliability in the base versions of the Highlander. If that's a concern at all, just get the hybrid Highlander, because it is most likely the most reliable version of this vehicle. Again, let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And is the Highlander suddenly on your shopping list because of the turbo, or is it suddenly off the list because of the turbo. I'll see all of you later.